Now let's do our first exercise. We'll build a pendulum animation from scratch. The first thing we need to do is create the pendulum. So to do that, we can use the oval tool, and we'll go ahead and center that on the artboard with the align tools, and then we'll make it white. Now this is going to be the bottom of the pendulum. And now we need to add a little stick that will actually swing the ball. And to do that, we'll use the pen tool. So we can draw a line, and obviously we can't see it, and that's because we don't have a stroke. So we can add a stroke and increase the thickness, and then go ahead and position it centered on the ball. Now that we have our artwork, let's create a simple rig. We'll do that by just grouping everything. So to do that, we'll select both the stick and the ball, and then hit Command G or Control G, and that will group everything. We can also go ahead and center this on the artboard. All right, now that we got that, we need to move our rotation point, because if we rotate it now, you can see that the pendulum is rotating from the center, and what we really want is it to rotate from the end of the stick. Now, to do this, we're going to need to activate freeze mode, and we can either activate freeze mode from the menu here, or we can hit the Y key, and that will activate freeze mode. You'll see that the editor has this blue border around it, and now we're free to move that group to where we want. Once we get the group in the right spot, we can hit the done button, and when we rotate it, you can see that now the pendulum's swinging from the right spot. Okay, before we start animating, I'm going to go ahead and rename this group and call it the pendulum group. And then we're going to create one more group. It's just a general group, and this is going to be our root group. Now, this root group's purpose is that if we add any animations, we can reposition this object, rescale it, rotate it, whatever, and it won't affect our animation. So we can hit Control G again, Command G, and that will create another group, and we'll rename it root. Okay, now we're ready to start animating. So let's hop over to animate mode, and we can do that with this toggle up here at the top, or remember, you can hit tab, and we'll select our first timeline. Now we can center our artboard by hitting F, and that's going to fill the artboard, and we're ready to start animating. So we can select our pendulum, and you'll notice that we're selecting the root group. So let's make sure that we're actually selecting our animation group, which is that pendulum group. And you'll know that we have it selected because we can test it out, and you can see that it's rotating from the right spot. All right, so let's set the first key, and we'll do a rotation of like 35 degrees. We can also use this number field in the inspector if we want to be really specific with it. Now let's do our second key, and we can put it about halfway down the timeline at 30F, and we'll have it swing to the other side. So all we need to do is grab this piece right here and go ahead and rotate it, and it'll be -35. Again, you can also type that value in the inspector. Now, if we want to check our motion, we can go ahead and scrub the timeline just to make sure that we're getting things right. So we're building a loop, so we need to get back to this first key. So what we can do is put our playhead at the end, and then either type the value in up top, or we can copy this key here with Control C or Command C, and then paste it with Control V, Command V. Now, if you want to check the animation, we can either scrub the timeline, and you can see that we're in the right spot, or you can hit the space bar, and that'll play back our animation. Now, we did set the animation to loop already, so if you haven't done that, make sure you go ahead and do that too. At this point, we've got the right keys set, but it doesn't really look like gravity is creating this swing. So to do that, we're going to need to change the interpolation on our keys. So we can select all of our keys, and you'll notice that right now our interpolation is set to linear, so there's no acceleration or deceleration. But if we choose this option here, the cubic curve, you'll notice that when you look at the graph, we have this accelerating effect and then deceleration at the end. Now let's preview the animation and see how that affects it. Now we're starting to get there, and it looks like the pendulum is being affected by gravity, but we can refine this motion a bit more. So let's go ahead and tweak our curve and just give it a little bit more deceleration and a bit stronger acceleration. All right, let's preview the animation and see what we think. All right, I think this looks a lot better. Now, just to recap, The process that we went through was that we created our artwork, we put it in a group, we renamed it, put it in a root group, renamed it root group, and then we came over, set some keys, and then finally we added in the interpolation and then adjusted those curves. So now that we have everything, let me just show you what this root group is used for. So if we go back to design mode, what we can do is make some adjustments to the root group, and let's say maybe we can reposition it or rescale it. I'll stick it up here and then scale it down a little bit. And then we can go back into animate mode, and you'll see that this doesn't affect our animation at all. We've made the object smaller, and when we play everything back, we've just adjusted the position and the scale. So that's why it's always important to make sure you set up your root group before you start animating.